I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. And prior to my birth, my parents and my mother's brothers and sisters converted to Islam. They were looking for a better way of life, an improvement upon what their parents had taught them, and they were really seeking a change. And that was a really momentous time, late 60s, 1970s, of change. And Islam really spoke to them in that context.
I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was born in a Muslim household where my father was an imam. An imam is, for those of you who are not Muslim, is a prayer leader, but sometimes when thought of in the kind of the more Western or American concept, people think of them in terms of more like the head of a masjid or a priest, or it's not the same, but sometimes, living in a household with somebody who is given sometimes that level of responsibility for their community. So it does, as a child, give you sometimes a little bit of intimidation, because you're like the imam's daughter. You kind of walk around and you have to make sure you're on your P's and Q's. But for me, it was an amazing experience because my father was an imam who really taught about social justice and about the universality of Islam, and about how it was important that as Muslims we educate ourselves and feel free to educate others about our religion, and that we were proud of our faith, and that we were proud about sharing that faith with other people.
Karama means dignity in Arabic, and it comes from the Quranic verse, "We have given dignity to the children of Adam." And this verse kind of means that, we don't differentiate between men and women, but that God gives dignity to all human beings. Karama was founded in 1993 by Dr. Aziza al-Hibri, who's a law professor at the University of Richmond and is also on the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. She was in a place during the feminist movement where she found that people believed that human rights and Islam were mutually exclusive, as if you couldn't have one or the other, and that religion, and Islam in particular, promoted a lack of human rights or women's rights. And she personally didn't believe that this was the case. And so that kind of gave her the impetus to found Karamah. And since then, we do a lot of educational programs, scholarship and research, and promoting Muslim women's rights and kind of furthering that cause. So we're really excited to kind of start reaching out to the community more, getting to know you, getting you on board with what we're doing. We're always very excited to have more people join in on the cause.
And prior to my birth, my parents and my mother's brothers and sisters converted to Islam. They were looking for a better way of life, an improvement upon what their parents had taught them, and they were really seeking a change. And that was a really momentous time, late 60s, 1970s, of change. And Islam really spoke to them in that context. It really resonated with their desire for empowerment, respect, and peace. And they were from the American South, and their parents were rooted in the Black church. So for them to change their faith, it was a very revolutionary thing. It was a very brave thing for them to do. And for that, they are my heroes. They were my heroes then, and they continue to be my heroes, because it's not an easy thing to convert and change your religion when the rest of your family may be practicing another religion. So currently, half my family are Muslim and half of them are Christian. So I experienced diversity and religious tolerance from an early age. Their commitment to improving what their grandparents taught them really reinforced my commitment to making my journey important and impactful to my community and to my brothers and sisters and people around me. My faith propels me through life, and it was taught me that no matter what I plan, Allah is the best of planners, and to trust in faith when things are difficult or when I'm going through trials and tribulations within my life, both professionally and personally. During difficult times, I rely upon that faith to propel me through things. And as a Muslim, I take our commitment to helping the less fortunate to heart in all of my work, both professionally and personally. And my upbringing in the Deem shapes who I am today. As a Muslim woman, as an American, as a Creole person, Native American, all the tapestry that makes up who I am. I'm part of two different groups that are often seen as minorities, African Americans and Muslims within this country. And so for that, I always looked at those images of those different groups in the media to see what type of truth was reflected. And the truth that I saw and the images that I saw in my home weren't necessarily reflected in media. So it was my strong desire to create those images and make more realistic images of African Americans and Muslims within the media. And I feel that telling our story is crucial in explaining or understanding who we are as a community. For the last 5 years, I've worked as a consultant, directing, managing, and using email, video, and online petitions to push forward progressive issues. Issues like improving the environment, issues like voter mobilization, and issues of interest abroad, talking about military contractors that are abusing the monies that are given to them from U.S. taxpayers and whatnot. I produce work for Impact, that's the Muslim Public Affairs Council, Unity Productions, and the Muslim Entrepreneurial Summit last year. And these were all video projects that were involving Muslim Americans. One project was promoting participation within the U.S. Census for Muslim Americans in California. And the important part of doing these types of images that involve Muslims, I always wanted to make sure that it encompassed the entire community. And we're a very diverse community of faith, so I wanted to make sure that in all of my pieces, I made sure to reflect that diversity. My new media work has been mostly for startups and for nonprofits that are especially susceptible to a tumultuous economy. So this evening, I wanted to focus on writing out the tough times, the times in between. When I talk about the in-between, I'm reminded of what my father would always say to me about enjoying the journey. Meaning during the time of a life transition, graduation from college, moving to a new city, or even losing a job or losing a position or moving back home with family, it's important to take maximum advantage of your time to dedicate yourself to professional development, to volunteer service. And I had that opportunity in 2007 when I was laid off from a position that I was working in California. And so during that time of layoff, throughout my time of applying for positions and looking for my next position, I did volunteer work. I worked with the presidential campaign. I traveled to Nevada, Texas, with groups like the LA Young Dems or the LA Young Democrats to canvass neighborhoods in Nevada and work directly with the Obama for America campaign office. I went on a trip with two other friends who were unemployed, and we drove to Texas, made homemade signs, experienced racism, hope, and a lot of unhealthy food. That trip experience, it gave me skills that I hadn't had before. It empowered me. It forced me to do something that I was afraid of doing, talking to strangers about what my political beliefs are, who I was endorsing. And I got to see a part of this country that I hadn't before, and was blessed to see the beauty of the West and the panhandle from the road. And it's important, especially when you come from a place like I come from in California. I grew up, in a very diverse immigrant community, to understand that that is not necessarily the United States. The United States is very segregated, and in certain pockets of the country, it can be very conservative. So really getting a time to travel and see different parts of the country geographically is important when you're a communicator, a media person, or if you're doing any type of professional thing, as far as understanding the motivation and where people are coming from. So from there, I went on to consult. I pitched my media projects to small nonprofits. I went about doing these projects and was able to hire associates and friends and bring them to fruition. The work I did involved traveling and working and finding new ways to deliver my work product. And one piece I produced in cooperation with a reporter who was working on the ground in Afghanistan, because I use new media. So there's a There were different sites that this reporter was working on the ground doing a project, and he would shoot photo and video and put it on the internet, and I would download it from the site that he had put it up there and integrate it into this video piece that I did, and to integrate into my final video. So I applied for fellowships, the Democracy for America Scholarship to attend Netroots Blogger Convention in Austin. I applied for the Frontline World Scholarship to produce a video on day laborers in Los Angeles, and a PBS New Media Fellow. That was a virtual check-in that culminated in my first trip to the nation's capital. And although I had the advantage of being in the professional world for over 10 years before I was laid off, I think you can all apply these practices to your early career. It's important to think about humbling yourself and move home and volunteer for an organization you respect and admire. Apply for fellowships, work with your massages and community organizations to improve the lives of the less fortunate. Practice sadaqah and travel to conferences, meet new people. I attended ISNA, RISE, and progressive conferences to feed myself both spiritually and learn. And take a position with an assistant of someone that you admire, a leader that you admire, an organization that does work that you aspire to do. Create your own business, provide a service needed in the community, and make a virtual office. Provide your work product via a virtual conduit like an FTP, a Flickr, or any type of site like that. I'm a huge fan of the internet, and because of this amazing invention, the world has become closer. We've become a closer community, and we can better communicate and collaborate with each other. I've used work product from artists in Kenya and Afghanistan and the Middle East. You can work with people all over the world and do it right from your bedroom. Amplify your skills. You may have a JD, a BS, a BA. You may be fluent in Arabic, Urdu, or Spanish. Languages are marketable skills in this ever-increasing global society. Use your background to make yourself an expert. I use my Spanish language skills to teach preschool students. I also worked as a transcriber. And my language skills made me a viable candidate when it came to my position at the Democratic National Committee. Think about what you can do with your hobbies. Do you know a second or third language? Do you know digital media? Do you have cultural competency? Or small business acumen, or an affinity for youth or some other constituency or community. During my time of unemployment, I was volunteering at the Media Aid Center in South Central Los Angeles, and the center taught media skills to young people and to the community to kind of incubate this whole legion of citizen journalists. I began mentoring. I was asked to mentor a young woman. The executive director asked me to mentor a young woman, and within production, it's a very male-dominated world. And I took this young lady under my wings and taught her and exposed her to productions, real-life productions in Los Angeles and communities around that area. And I told a friend about my work at the Media Aid Center, and she recommended she recommended us to apply for a subcontract for a project that she was doing in Northern California. So through that, we applied for that grant, and we won the subcontract, and I was able to provide jobs for these young people who were living and working in South Central, where we traveled the state teaching junior high school, middle school students how to use media to put together these videos to promote cleaner living, to promote healthy environments and healthier eating. So our students were awarded that grant, and it empowered them because they were making money, and these were, many of them were impoverished students. All of them were impoverished students. So providing that opportunity really made me feel proud. I wanted to finish up my remarks by saying that all of you, especially the young people in the room and the people who are not so young, you're all talented and brilliant. And I want to encourage you to make your time count. Work with your favorite Muslim organization like Karamah. Give back and volunteer. The times now are very tumultuous, and if you are going through a time of transition, just make your time count and create, because no matter what field you're working in or what field you're aspiring to do, it's vital that we cultivate that creativity. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight, to see old friends and to see new ones. My name is Raheemah Abdulaleem. I am a senior trial attorney for the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, where I do employment litigation work. It's quite a mouthful, and I know many of you are probably wondering, what does that all mean? How did she get there? And I'm going to share with you some stories about my background, how I got to the position that I am currently in now. And please, when we have the Q&A, ask questions. I really like to be able to engage in a dialogue, so you can really ask, questions about, was it hard? Was it challenging? And I'll try to kind of preempt some of those questions by, giving you some background. But if there's something that I missed out on that you just had, it's a burning question, please feel free to ask. I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was born in a Muslim household where my father was an imam. An imam is, for those of you who are not Muslim, is a prayer leader, but sometimes when thought of in the kind of the more Western or American concept, people think of them in terms of more like the head of a masjid or a priest, or it's not the same, but sometimes, living in a household with somebody who is given sometimes that level of responsibility for their community. So it does, as a child, give you sometimes a little bit of intimidation, because you're like the imam's daughter. You kind of walk around and you have to make sure you're on your P's and Q's. But for me, it was an amazing experience because my father was an imam who really taught about social justice and about the universality of Islam, and about how it was important that as Muslims we educate ourselves and feel free to educate others about our religion, and that we were proud of our faith, and that we were proud about sharing that faith with other people. And to me, that meant a lot, because growing up in the 70s and 80s, where not a lot of people knew a lot about Islam, I was fortunate to live in Philadelphia, which did and still does have a very large Muslim community, especially African American Muslim community. But still, there were sometimes challenges where, you start wearing a hijab, which is a head covering, and no one else is really wearing one. And people are asking you, well, why do you do that? And so you're kind of an emissary for your faith. But for me, growing up, having that kind of home rearing, where there was a focus on us actually giving back to our community, that kind of inspired the work that I do today, and kind of set the groundwork for me having a career where I would be a public servant, and where I would be an attorney who was focused on civil rights issues. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, when it was time for, I have an older sister who is a year older than I, and my father was always very adamant that, as Muslims, it was important for us to become educated and to continue our education. Both my parents were college educated, so it was without a question that my sister and I would go to college, and that we would, pursue whatever career paths that we wanted. And so my sister decided to go to college, and she went down to Duke. It was time for me to look at colleges, and alhamdulillah, I had a sister who was the year older, so what does any younger sister do but use all the material that she had done the year before and go visit those same schools and figure out what schools meshed well with me. I ended up going to Yale University, which at the time, and which still today it was an amazing experience, which had a very small Muslim community. This is the mid 90s. Now there's a lot more. When I go back and visit, Yale has like a Muslim chaplain now. A lot of schools have Muslim chaplains now. Back in the 90s, that there just weren't. No one had a Muslim. Maybe I won't say no one, but very few universities that I'm familiar with had Muslim chaplains. And so I feel in many ways, those of us who went to school in the 90s were part of a next generation of Muslims who were on campus, who are beginning to leave our mark. And so there was a small, Muslim Student Association at Yale, where we tried to make sure we did things so that people knew more about our faith and our community. And then from Yale, I went to Harvard for law school. And once again, the focus in my career was trying to do civil rights work. Going to Harvard to me is an excellent opportunity, because it had a much bigger Muslim population. And so it was an opportunity to really meet and engage with a lot of Muslims from all over the world, all over the country. And after law school, I did what most people from Harvard do, and that is they enter corporate America. All of my good intentions of being, the public servant that I was, and was at heart and remained, became subsumed with what was easy. And in law school, especially back then, it was the end of the tech boom or the beginning of the tech boom or somewhere in the middle, where it was just easy to get jobs in corporate America for law firms. And I was overwhelmed with law school and made the decision, well, look, I'm just going to go work for a firm, because the firm is just, you put your resume in an envelope and you get these job offers miraculously, it seemed like. And so after law school, I started working for a firm doing management side Title VII work. And so what that meant was that, unlike what I thought I would be doing with my law degree, I was someone who was defending companies who were charged with discrimination. And that was to the dismay of so many people in my family. They were like, I can't believe that you went to Yale and Harvard and now you are defending companies who have been charged with discrimination. And one of the things that helped me is that I always remained true to my ideals. I didn't compromise, my philosophy on what was right and what was wrong, even if I was representing management. It meant that if I came and I looked at a file and it was clear that the company had done something that was wrong, I didn't try to sugarcoat it and identify a way for them to get out of what they had done wrong. I would look at the facts and say, you guys have done something wrong. We need to figure out a way for you to make this right. And so I felt that even though I was representing management, which was something I didn't assume that I would be doing, I still had an opportunity to make sure that wrongs were righted while I worked there. Some of the things that I learned there, which are applicable to both Muslim women and non-Muslim women, are it's important that when you are working in, whether it's corporate America or whether it's nonprofits, that you identify sponsors. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and she's the one who first mentioned this idea of sponsorship to me. And I was like, what is a sponsor? Everybody always talks about mentors. And she was like, let's stop. Mentors are important. And it's important that you identify a mentor. But a sponsor is different. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? What's the difference between a sponsor and a mentor? And she was like, a sponsor is that person who is going to be your advocate, who's going to be in the room where they're making decisions about who gets what assignment. And you want that sponsor to be at the table and say, Raheemah gets that job. Now, your mentor may be well-intentioned, but your mentor may not be in a position to actually be in that room where the decisions are made. So you want to, in any career path that you take, make sure that you identify a sponsor who can be your advocate in the room when decisions are being made, because that oftentimes makes a difference between people who are extremely successful and people who aren't, because a sponsor may look like you or they may not. But a sponsor, the one thing that a sponsor does have is your best interest at heart, and they have an opportunity and an ability to make sure that you get the work that you deserve. Another thing that I would say is that it's important to be prepared. Be prepared about whatever job you are going to take. Read up on any company or industry. Be proactive, because opportunities, especially in this economy, will not magically appear. It is important for you to be proactive and to actively seek out those opportunities. And I will also say it's important to be proud of who you are. What makes you unique and what makes your perspective different are assets. As Muslims, it is important for us to embrace our unique individuality, whether it's ethnically, religiously, and let that perspective be something that we bring to the table. I'll share with you all that I worked for another firm at one point, and they represented a company that had something to do with blood products. And so they came to me because they had a question. They had someone who wanted to donate blood who wore a hijab, a head covering. And the company was adamant. They were like, no, she can't wear it. She has to take it off. And so, of course, I get this assignment, and I'm like, this is so transparent. You want me to basically, co-sign on this decision that you've made. But I'm going to do the research to identify, what the company's issue is with her wearing a headscarf. And so, for me, it was important, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to be there, because legally there weren't the most, there weren't the best arguments on either side. It was one of these areas that's really gray, because oftentimes when you deal with discrimination, you're looking at relationships. And so it wasn't an employer-employee relationship. It wasn't a housing relationship. The company didn't get, funding from, any kind of public funding. So you really are looking at, a very, very narrow area where it's possible they could have actually, adopted this policy and gotten away with it. But I felt that I wasn't going to compromise myself, my principles, to allow a company to adopt what I felt was, a policy that was clearly done, that really was not medically or legally sound, in my opinion. And so I think it's important to really be proud of who you are and your identity, and to not compromise on what you think is true, is right, and what's just. And that situation, my boss, he kept saying, well, Raheemah, legally I think they can do it. I'm like, but practically why? Are you saying that because if someone's bald, they can't give blood? So why do you have to see someone's hair for them to actually give blood? It doesn't really make any sense. What does giving blood have to do with whether somebody has hair? It's not like you're saying that we need to see their hair to see if they are healthy, or that, they can actually, give blood. It just seemed like a rule without a reason. And many people may have said, well, I think you're fighting a battle you may lose, but you have to be willing to take those stances. Many of my friends in the room have probably heard me refer to this article that I read, and I keep a copy of on my desk. And this is really for the women in the room. But the men, please take this to heart too, for the women that you may work with. It's an article called 12 Workplace Mistakes That Women Make. And it applies for Muslims and my non-Muslim friends. And I won't go through all of them, but there's a couple that I always refer to because it speaks to some of the issues that I still continue to have to this day. One of them is pretending that it's a picnic and not a game. And this goes to the fact that the arena of work is exactly that. It's a game. It has rules, boundaries, winners and losers, and women tend to approach work more like an event, like a picnic or a fundraiser, where everyone comes together to play nicely, trying to create win-win situations. Playing the game doesn't mean you're out to cause others to fail, but it is competitive. It means you're aware of the rules. And so that's one of the things that I've tried to make sure that I'm aware of, is that it's important to know the rules of any workplace that you go to understand that, you're here and you're there to win. Doesn't mean you have to change what your ideals are, but it's important to know that there is a game that's at play. Another thing that is a huge mistake that I've heard myself make many times is minimizing your work. And this is when, women are asked, what do you do? And it's like, oh, I work in a company. And even sometimes myself, oh, what school did you go to? Oh, I went to college in Connecticut. Oftentimes men just don't do those types of things. They say, I am running a Fortune 500 company, and I have played an integral role in the work that is done at the company. And the woman may actually have a job that has more weight or heft in the company, but you would never know by the way they've answered the question. Every job in an organization is critical to its operation. So whether you're the secretary or whether you're the CEO, make sure that everyone knows the importance of your job. Let me see. There's two other ones that I just wanted to go over briefly. This one I thought was hilarious, and I try to stop myself from doing it all the time and my husband always reminds me, like, don't do that. It's accentuating the negatives. And this here says, why is it that women so often have the need to blurt out the truth about themselves, even if it's self-disparaging or damaging? A study was once done in which men and women were asked to describe themselves. The men, regardless of appearance, described themselves in factual and positive terms. I'm 6 feet tall, brown, 195 pounds, and have a mustache, said one portly aging man. Women were more likely to use pejorative phrases such as, my hair is graying, I could stand to lose a few pounds, I'm not too bad looking. The same holds true when a woman is asked to debrief a particular project where something has gone askew. She'll blame herself. She'll identify all the things she could have done differently. Men, they're objective and Teflon-like in their descriptions. One man accused of designing an ill-conceived methodology said, the problem wasn't the methodology, it was that the methodology didn't reflect realistic measures of the process. But he was the one who designed the methodology in the first place. So that's something that I tried. I sometimes fall short of it, but it's something that I think as women, it's important that we remember, that we, definitely tell the truth and be honest about your shortcomings, but do it in a way where you don't cast yourself in a negative light. Another one is minimizing yourself. And this really talks about, when a woman answers the phone, oftentimes